The president is the chief executive officer of this corporation called the United States of America.
So Los Angeles is a big place, and
it's interesting the name, the City of Angels, and then of course you had mentioned right there that the Nazi movement had started there, and of course we have Hollywood, which is the inner.
Yeah, it's the Marxist-Leninist communist, and that was started in England and America also. So all these different fascist, Nazi, communists, Marxist-Leninism, all of these destructive, demonic and depravity of mistreating the human race, man's inhumanity to man. All of that started here in Christendom. It all started in Christian countries like America and England. Yeah, think about that. All the horrible wars and World War I, World War II, all the violence and drug addiction, pornography, all of the horrible, tragic murders and all the stuff that's going on around the world. Yeah, it's in America and England. It's in Europe, the home of the white man, the home of the Christian religion.
The awesome pyramids of Giza in Cairo could only have been built by a people with absolute mastery of engineering, architecture, physics, mathematics, astrology, and a host of other sciences. Down through time after their construction, scholars and scientists from around the world have come here to study not only the physical structures, but who built them, how they did it, and why. Professor Yosef Jochannan is an Egyptologist, having taught at Cornell University for over 15 years. Dr. Ben, as he is affectionately known, has lectured widely on both sides of the Atlantic. His theme, the ancient civilizations of Egypt. His presentations have placed him in great demand by students and community groups, especially those of African descent. Perhaps the high regard he enjoys today stems from his long, unwavering theme that the ancient civilizations along the Nile were African. In his many appearances on Like It Is, he has said so emphatically, time after time, in the face of most of the curriculums and the Cecil B. DeMilles of our day. This is why Like It Is came to Egypt with Dr. Ben, to have him show us what he's been saying to us for such a long time. From the Nile's east bank to the west bank, our journey's first stop was at the wondrous pyramids of Giza. How big is this pyramid that we're on? Which pyramid are we on now?
This is we are the one of Khufu, which the Greeks call Cheops. This is 48 stories tall. About a story, let's say, from one floor to the next floor, 10 feet. So you got 48 times 10, 480 foot tall. Now, the metal you see on the top there, showing you where the end of the capstone was originally, before it was removed. So it will be fought. But then the building goes down into the ground. What you see there is the earth surface, earth level. But below there you got another 2 stories down, where you got cutways, walkways, tunnels, and so forth. And recent sounding, they have voids that they believe to be other rooms or whatever, chambers or so forth. Now, downstairs you have beautiful work, the friezes and so forth that tells various things that the average person will see on the outside. But it's about 3.5 city blocks. 3 times 200 plus approximately 640 feet.
Each leg is 3.5 city blocks.
Roughly square. A square was 640 feet. You got about 2 million blocks in this building. About 2 million.
How much do they estimate each one of these blocks of granite? This is granite?
No. This is limestone.
How did they bring that stone all the way from...
And barges, and floating barges. Quite recently they found the area where they dock, like a wharf, harbor, where they were able to come off the Nile and come up into this area and bring the stones that were brought.
Now, you're a civil engineer. How was this thing built? How did they, once they got the blocks here, how did they put them on top of one another? What is the nature of this awesome building?
There are a lot of theories. Mine, if I could add mine, and it may not be mine, some other people may have thought of it, but I take my theory from Karnak Temple, or the Temple of Warit. There is an excess of a ramp left there. And there's some places you can see some pieces of ramp. So it is obvious that they use the ramp system. The higher they go, to keep the same pitch, the longer the ramp came, so they can keep the same degree. It was easy then, because remember, you have about 300,000–400,000 people not working during the inundation period, the flood period. All of these monuments, wherever you go, are built in highland, above the flood level. So when the flood comes, these workers, these farmers have nothing to do. They have this.
So it's not this myth about slave labor?
Nonsense. Slave labor is nonsense. Pure, mitigated nonsense. These men were not guessing. They knew definitely what they were about to do.
Is it true that each corner of this pyramid represents dead north, south, east, and west?
It is. It's on target, as I said. The most modern engineering, geological, geosophical instruments cannot do this.
Dr. Ben, was it always called a pyramid?
And no, pyramid is a Greek word.
Meaning what?
House of fire.
House of fire?
Yeah, mid is house.
Pyromania.
Pyromania, house of fire.
Why did they call it that?
Well, I could understand a firehouse. It's just like saying Heliopolis instead of saying on. On would be the sun, or the house, the city of the sun. Well, since the sun was symbolically, Ra, was symbolically the expression of the deity, of the god, then here, the Pharaoh was building a place where he could come in tune with Ra. That's why the solar boat, so he can go on to the Sea of Ra, the next world.
So what is a pyramid actually? What is the function of the pyramid when it was built?
It's the resting place, the final resting place for the body, the cat of the Pharaoh. People, all kinds of people have different theories, but the only one we can get from the ancients, we read in the works, it was the final resting place.
Now when you came here, like everyone who looks upon this, it blows your mind.
Then I decided I got to study it. Because I didn't come with intent to study. I came with intent to see, just to see.
Well, who did you go to when you were here? You were just here on your own?
I was here on my own. Believe it, I had just married. The tradition, my father and mother pick up my wife. I had to marry by the culture. It was, I'm going to marry the girl, I marry her. She's pregnant, and my father said, look, you got to go, you don't have much time. We are going to take all the expenses for your wife, and we want you to come back before she delivers, so you must go, because it's not going to be much more time. I want you to go before I die. He wasn't going to die. He was a young man. The possibility of dying was remote at that time. But he felt that he wanted me to see this, because I had been always complaining of people saying that I came from a place where people eat people, that in Africa this, in Africa that the whole Nile Valley that I was boasting of was nothing. And so my father said, no, when you come back, you tell me who doesn't have civilization. Is it you or the European?
Now there are three here that are right alongside one another.
Father, son, and grandson.
I see.
The father is one Khufu, the son, the one behind this, Afra, and the grandson, the last one, Menkara.
Well, now, that high point that you were standing at, as you looked at it, which is which?
There's a little trick here. You can't build a pyramid bigger than your father's or higher. So what Khafra did is build a pyramid smaller than his father's, but on higher ground. So
it looks bigger.
It looks bigger than his father's pyramid. So he didn't violate his father's instruction.
But he did his damage anyway.
He did the damage.
in Cairo from where? Alexandria?
Alexandria.
And you went there by boat?
I went to Alexandria by boat, and I came down to Cairo by freight train.
Now, where did you tell me where you went from there?
Well, I went and got housing at the El Nil Hotel. Then from the El Nil, I got a freight train going south, which is in this direction, until I got down here at Luxor. And at this point, the railway station is back away from the Nile a bit, the city of Luxor per se, not here at the waterfront.
All right. Now, before we head on that journey south, you, of course, went to the pyramids at Giza.
In
Cairo.
When at that area, there was only one building, and that was the Mena House, and considered to be way out in the country. Way out. The cement village and all those places were not there yet.
You went to the pyramids at Giza, and you were pretty much on your own, but you tried to join a group of students who were there with a professor from England. Is that true?
Yes.
Would you repeat that again?
There was a professor by the name of Goodenough, and he had, I think it was 6 or 7 students. In those days, there was no school for Egyptology. You either was in a school for architecture, religion, archaeology or so, any of those disciplines, and you came and studied with a field man, and you learn in the field. There were very few so-called textbooks in Egyptology. Egyptology was a thing which you did your apprenticeship with a person in the field.
What happened when you ran into this professor?
Well, when I went to saw the professor and saw what they were doing, it was right down the alley of what I wanted to do.
What were they doing?
They were digging, they were examining and looking at the reliefs in the various buildings. I asked to join in with them. And I was honestly told that they were sorry that they didn't take people of my color, and the exact words. And I said, well, it would be nothing wrong I was doing. I was willing to compromise, and I wouldn't get into their way. And he finally said, well, all right, you could stay and go around what we do, but you can't sleep along with us. You would have to sleep away from us.
Tell me some of the names that you were referred as.
I was called Snow White.
By this professor?
By professor and the other students. At the time when they want to relate to me, they said Snow White or Black Boy. There were so many other names, Black Sambo. And they would come out and say it whenever they felt like it. Sometimes they would say African, and that's supposed to be an insulting word. To call me an African, I was supposed to feel bad, but that one I was very happy. When they called me African, I was happy that day.
Did you get into the Museum of Cairo at that time?
No, because the Museum of Cairo, they wouldn't let me go in there. You didn't go in the Museum of Cairo looking like me. You actually couldn't go in there looking like me.
Libraries? Did you go to a university?
They were not open to me.
So you were really on your own?
Yes. Egypt under the British at that time was no different than Georgia or Mississippi in the United States to a black person.
The pyramids in Giza, did you just examine one, or did you examine all 3 and the Sphinx?
I really at the time didn't examine per se. I knew that the tunnel, the downstairs or into the pyramid, that there were downstairs walkways and so forth. They weren't open to me at that particular time.
Going through the streets of Cairo today, heavily congested, we see all the shops and a lot of people. Was it pretty much like that in those days?
No. Cairo got 16, 14, 15, whatever million people. I think in those days, Cairo may have had close to 1 million, if that much. It had quite a healthy-sized city. But in 1939, I couldn't tell you the month because I didn't have that leisure to look that close to the population, but I guess it was pretty close to 500,000 or something like that.
All right, so you boarded this train and you headed south, and your first stop was Luxor, and then you went down to Aswan.
Yes, the first stop was Luxor, and it took two and a half days to get down to Luxor.
And then from there?
And from there, I went, I heard there were quite a lot of things to see on the West Bank. I saw the East Bank, and then I could imagine what was on the West Bank. But I didn't have time to go to the West Bank because I wanted to go down as far as I could where the train went, and that was Aswan.
Now, the Nile flows downward to the north. Here, the pace is tranquil and most beautiful. The people here are, as Dr. Ben himself would say, burnt of skin. On the afternoon of our arrival on a sailboat called a felucca, Dr. Ben unfolded the story of the ancient civilizations of the Nile.
According to a great high priest of ancient Egypt by the name of Hunefer, Hunefer, he wrote a papyrus. It's known as the papyrus of Hunefer, the paper of Hunefer. He said, we came from the beginning of the Nile, where God happy dwells, at the foothill of the mountain of the moon. The mountain of the moon, there are two places in Egypt, in Africa named Mountain of the Moon. One is between Ethiopia or Kenya and Tanganyika, called Kilimanjaro, means Mountain of the Moon. The other is in Uganda, Rwenzori. It also means Mountain of the Moon. So when you look at it, there's two bodies of water that make up the Nile here. The Nile came down as a body of water from Ethiopia called the Blue Nile. The White Nile is a body of water from Uganda. Both of these bodies of waters meet in Khartoum in Sudan. They continue from further north from the south, and they meet another body of water out of the Ethiopian highland, and that's called the Atbara River. And in Atbara, Sudan, those other two bodies meet. Therefore, from then on to here and to the Mediterranean, which was called the Great Sea, that body of water, the Nile, has been the one that played the highway for a major civilization that started in Central East Africa and reached its zenith in this land.
And so you're saying then that the people of Central Africa migrated north up along this river?
Yes, I'm saying that the original high culture, where the people first start to make scratches, symbols, writing down, hieratic and so forth, finally develop into alphabetical presentations, mathematical signs, religious signs and symbols and so forth. They actually had their beginning in Central East Africa.
All right, so there were several thousand years that encompassed this dynastic period that preceded the birth of Christ.
If you deal with Manetho's figure, it would be from 4100 BC.
4,000 years.
Yes, and to 30. Now, if you deal with other figures like Marriott, Budge, Maspero, and others, they got varying period or varying dates for the beginning of the dynastic period.
All right, now this is a long period of time. There were several kings or pharaohs and queens. A lot happened in this period. There were wars. If someone wanted to get an overview of what was the most significant periods in this 4,000-odd year period, what would you point to? What kings were the most significant, or pharaohs? What queens were the most important?
In reality, that's very hard to do. However, since we all have opinions, the 18th dynasty would consider to be the one with the most action. However, I would have to say the first dynasty, in that brought into effect all that happened after that. What happened is this southern man, the country was divided into two, the north and the south. This man in the south, Nama, a king, organized his other vassals, other small kings, against the man in the north to have a unity, a man called Scorpion. They met in a battle for unity. Either the south was going to control the north or the north was going to control the south, and they met at a place called Memnefa, to they call Memphis. The war was fought there, and the men from the south, Nama, won. He took his concept of the deity, God, Ra, against the man who lost his concept of the deity, Amen. You would think that he would put Ra in front since he's the one that won, but no. He was wise. Psychologically, he said, no, I wouldn't change. He let the God of the north be the first to be mentioned, and thus he made one God out of two, Amen, Ra. So the people in the north said, this must be a good man. He let our God be the first to be mentioned.
And all of this was devised in a place called Memphis.
Memnefa or Memphis.
Now, if we were to go to Memphis, what would we see today? Are there anything that's remnant of that period?
Very little. You will see some statues by Ramesses II, one at least about 40 feet, 30, 40 feet. Two in the yard, general yard, one of them having come to Tennessee when the Ramesses exhibit had come there, another one almost as large, and some other smaller statues. But the main buildings of the temple of god Ptah. Ptah was in the mythology the god who made gods, responsible for making gods.
The god of all gods.
The god of all gods. And you would see his, what's left of his temple, just sporadic pieces of foundation here and there. There isn't at least a quarter floor, or the height of a quarter floor, any place.
Was this done in Ramesses' lifetime?
The statue, yes.
It was.
Yes.
Did he order things like
you
this?
You know it is in his lifetime. Why?
Why?
Because he is standing on the left foot. Left foot forward. If he was standing this way, it would be, you know, he's dead.
He's dead when his feet are together.
But he's standing this way, he's alive.
Very near to Memphis is a place called Saqqara, where the world's first pyramid was built, although it was shaped somewhat differently. Dr. Ben showed us.
Did the Pharaoh design this pyramid and order its building, or did somebody else?
No. As a matter of fact, he had no business at all with it. The idea came from his prime minister, who was also an architect. As a matter of fact, he was a multi-genius, the first one recorded in all of human history. You got to consider we're talking about 2800 BC. This man called Imhotep, or for short, Imhotep. He didn't want his pharaoh to be buried like other pharaohs. He thought his pharaoh should be buried in a much more glorious state than the wood burial place that they had prior. So he decided, when looking around, I could use this material. It lasts forever. And thus he said a stone, limestone, and says, I'm going to build it out of this. But they were building burial places out of this wood in a square. So he decided, well, look, I'll just use a stone or stones and the same procedure, and that will last. But when he was finished, he said, gee, it's going to last, but it looks like nothing. So he decided to put another layer on the top and recess them, set them back, and 6 of them set back, look something like wet cake. They become steps, and thus the term step pyramid.
Sees the second at Abu Simbel, breathtaking to behold.
You can't look at this and say, they weren't Africans who were doing this. Why would they put somebody else's face?
Well, it's an artistic rendering.
They didn't have equipment to make thin lips and to make narrow nose, so they had to use that, and it wouldn't make. But then the little details of a fingernail, they had the equipment for that, but not for the thin lips.
Is it important, though, to say that Africans did this?
Oh yes, if no one had said the Africans didn't do it, it wouldn't be important. But since that had been said for no reason at all, they wanted to satisfy themselves that although they were not in history, that they did it. Now, since it is that the people whose ancestors did it could not say anything about it in the past, now is the time that they declare to the world whose legacy it is.
All four of these figures are of the same man.
Ramesses II. Ramesses ruled for about 67 years, and he was an engineer. And is known to have commissioned, not only that, his architect was known to at many times had him come and do some supervision. Like our symbol, it said that he supervised the building of our symbol himself.
So he was an engineer?
He was also an engineer. He was a very accomplished man.
So would he be qualified to be called a priest?
He studied in the priesthood. He took the reign of his father in 1298 when his father died. And he ruled till 1232. Some people vary a few years one way or the other. Some say 1230, some say, but around 2 years isn't going to make a difference.
How long did he live?
He ruled from 1298, according to Maneto's figure, until 1232, 67 years.
But how long did he live?
He lived to be 98, something like that.
98 years?
98, 97 years old.
And he had how many offspring, do you know?
Well, he had as many offspring as you got guides. Some say this. So he had many wives, some said 200 offspring, somebody said 100 offspring, some 30, 40. I don't know, but quite a lot.
And wives? How many wives did he have?
Quite a lot.
Quite a lot. But who was his favorite wife?
His favorite wife was Nefertari II.
What would possess somebody to look at something this magnificent and mark it up like that and defile it with their name? Eh?
There are many factors. One, hate. Two,
hate.
Grudge. Four, their own smallness. And five, it's a means of saying, I did it.
Now, in between these figures is a passageway. What's in there?
That's to get into the temple. That is an actual temple with a hypostyle hall, although there are only 4 columns on each side. And then on the walls, you will see the wars that Ramesses II fought with the Hittites and others. Of course, no record of the war, any war with the Hebrews, none whatsoever.
Right. And at the end of the corridor, there's a little chamber. What's that?
There's what you call the antechamber, and the next chamber to that, the last, would be the Holy of Holies, or the sanctuary.
Holy of Holies.
And inside the Holy of Holies will have the triad. Like you have the Trinity.
Yes.
That's where the concept of ancient Egyptian in every city had a holy triad, T-R-I-A-D, 3 gods. Normally a god, a goddess, and a god. A god, the father, a goddess, the mother, and a god, the son. The holy trinity that Christianity adopted. You notice this side. These are supposed to be the Asian captives of war of Ramesses II. You notice that? Carefully. Now let's shift side. These are supposed to be Nubians or generally Africans, but they're tied the exact same way as these on the side. Yet, in America, in the classroom. These are called Negro slaves of Ramesses. But these are called, in the same textbook, by the same professors, Asian captive or Semitic captives.
Prisoners of war.
No. Yes, prisoner of war here, but slaves there. Now, what made the difference?
Go and see. I can't possibly imagine.
All right, my brother.
Is this the full extent of the lights I can put on, or are there more lights? Dr. Ben, what are we looking at here? What is he filming?
That is the Opet procession, the procession of the priests. And after Ramesses come back from war and is victorious, it is the procession of the priests. Here is before God Ptah. He's in front, Ramesses is in front of God Ptah, appealing for long life.
What are we looking at?
The war of the Hittites against Egypt. Ramesses pursuing and fighting the Hittites. If you notice, the figures show you the strictly African characters.
So that's him on top of the chariot.
Him and his chariot.
And he's driving them out.
Yes, right. That's Ramesses slaying one of the enemies. And he wouldn't be slaying an ordinary soldier. He's slaying either the mayor or the king, but he wouldn't be shown slain because his men killed the regular men.
Who was he killing, though?
The Hittites.
The Hittites.
Hittites.
And who were the Hittites?
The Hittites are people from Asia.
All right. And there he is again.
That's right. And notice.
Waging war.
That's right.
Now,
and there he is wearing a suit with a penis cup, by the way. That is to protect.
Slaying his enemies.
Slaying the enemies.
As we left, Dr. Ben explained that this magnificent temple was originally located much closer to the Nile River and was recently moved.
So they had to raise this 100 feet up and back 600 feet.
5 nations assigned their best engineers to move these temples to higher ground to avoid them being engulfed by the rising waters from the newly constructed Aswan Dam. The monuments could not be moved intact, so they were painstakingly cut into smaller blocks and reassembled at this present location. The rescue effort cost a then estimated $36 million and was hailed as an engineering miracle. And rightly so. But what then does one say of those who originally created all of this, some 3,287 years ago?
And this is the temple of Nefertari.
The second.
The second. This was Ramesses' favorite.
His most favorite wife. Here's Ramesses.
And he lived to 99?
About 97.
97, I'm sorry. Good man.
Yes, I think he was that.
Now this is Ramesses again.
This is Ramesses.
That's a goddess.
That's Hathor.
Hathor, I can tell by the horns.
That's Nefertari. And see the graffiti there too. The mark of graffiti and them all over. It's typical of the behavior.
What do we have in here, Dr. Ben, on this wall?
The same thing, you have God Horus, or blessing the king, and here again you have the God Ptah also blessing the king, King Ramesses II. Nefertiti in front of Ptah.
Now this is a goddess.
Yes, it's
by her headdress.
But Nefertiti coming in the person of goddess Hathor.
I see.
And paying honor to the king Ptah.
What is this depicting here?
She is visiting goddess. She is again paying homage to goddess Hathor. Remember what I said? Hathor comes with a sun disk between the horn of the cow.
Right.
Now we know it's Hathor. If you put a little chair, the throne, on the top, it becomes what?
Osiris.
Isis.
Isis, I'm sorry.
If you put a maze, it becomes her sister, Nephthys.
How was this work done?
With chisel?
They gouged out, this is granite.
Yeah.
And they gouged it out.
They chisel it out. Now, in some work, where they didn't chisel, they take the work and they put a thin layer of plaster.
Yes.
And when the plastic was damp, they put a plate of the design, lightly. Then they came and draw over it. But in this case, where they got to chisel into the material, it was done with hammer and chisel.
And what about
when in place, not on the ground? First they put the stone up, then they do the finishing while it's up.
colors? Where did they get their colors from?
From clay, from tree barks, and they made their own color. Flowers, different way. They made different kinds of stain and dyes with the color.
To last this long, huh?
Oh yes, because they put it in the mortar, and it goes in and penetrates.
This was a place then for all people to come and worship.
It's a temple.
But the temple was in the name of
Goddess Hathor.
Goddess Hathor.
Nefertari temple for Goddess Het Heru, Goddess Hathor. Hathor, or Het, listen, Het, wife, Heru, wife of Horus.
Now, what is the significance of the figures being seated?
Well, the Pharaoh was at rest and he's sitting on his throne.
Okay.
See, next to him on his side is his throne.
And because Nefertari's feet are one in front of the other, she's alive.
Oh, the whole thing is alive. And you know he's alive, he's sitting on the throne. The only how you would know that he's dead if he had crossed his hands. No, even if the foot together is sitting down, he has to have crossed his hand, which you could do sitting down also, like an X. And then you will see the flail in one hand.
Yes.
And the crook, in the other.
That means death.
He's dead. But he's one of the Pharaoh who in real life had a beard. Because even in alive, they put a beard on him.
Look at those lips. Look at that nose.
Can you say I see my father there? At his ancestors? I mean, there can be no doubt about it. However,
that's not Charlton Heston.
Yeah, no. and Nefertari is not Elizabeth Taylor.
Thank you. I noticed that between his knees there are cartouches. What do they say?
His name? Amen Mary Ra. Ra Mary Amen. Rameses. Ra Mary Amen.
So that's a standard that they established to identify themselves as the cartouche.
The monarch was represented by the cartouche. If you don't see the cartouche, you can't. You might have seen a statue look exactly and say, this is so-and-so. You can't say it because there's no cartouche. To be sure, you must have the cartouche.
But now to identify the god and the goddesses, you don't necessarily need the cartouche because it's the head,
yes,
the headdress.
Yes, that never changed. One goddess is never shown with the other goddess appear. You got to be careful in only 3 cases. Nefertari, I'm sorry, Isis or Aset.
Yes.
Het Heru or Hathor, and Nephthys. You got to be careful of them because they're represented with a cow's horns.
All of them?
And a disc within the cow horn.
So how do you tell between?
On top the disc, you have a little throne. That's Isis.
Yes.
Without the disc,
yes,
it's Hathor. And with a little maze, it's Nephthys.
I saw that, right.
That's the way you tell one for the other. Because if you see it with one, it's impossible to be. If you see the throne and the disc, it's impossible to be anybody else than Isis.
So
and
just to keep you alert, they
make
do
you
that, huh?
they make you look for that one to see who it is.
Another temple that had been rescued from the rising waters created by the dam, the temple at Philae.
What god is this temple honoring?
Maybe more so goddess.
Goddess.
Goddess Aset or Ast, otherwise called Isis. Isis is the sister of her husband, god Asaru, Asar, otherwise called Osiris.
When was this built and under whose dynastic reign?
Well, the earliest period for this will go back to the Roman period, the Greek period. Mm-hmm. And the Greek period doesn't start any earlier than 332 BC because the Greeks came to Egypt as conquerors during 332, but it didn't start at that particular time. It is supposed to have been started during around 70 or so before the Common Era.
Before we get into more of the religious meaning, just architecturally, this whole alignment, the alignment of these columns is just magnificent. And it's just an architectural wonder unto itself. Did it have a ceiling? Was it covered?
Yes, you could see some of the slabs there. It was all covered, but you would notice something else, so that you could notice that this column over here isn't finished, isn't complete.
Yes.
That show you that all that beautiful thing you see, notice that they're in different stages. They would bring the stone and put them in place. Then they would carve them. That's very important note. But you also would note that there's a difference in the typical ancient Egyptian column as against these. These have made transformation in the design.
I see.
And whereas you will see, these are multiplicity of design concepts in there, and as you go up, you see the difference in change. Here you notice the fluted part is very narrow.
Yes.
With 3 bands, 4 bands, whereas a little further up, take the third one, the fluted column is wider, the flute at wider in dimension.
I see what you... Now, are all temples, including this one, basically the same in structure, that there's an ante-chamber and it goes back until you get to the Holy of Holies?
Basically, they start out with a people's court, open, and then if it's a large temple, it will be other courts with different pylons, or that would be a pylon. There'll be inner pylons. Now, after that, there will be a hypostyle hall of column, or otherwise called a pillared hall. After that, there will be an ante-chamber, which would be prior to the Holy of Holies.
Which is always at the end.
Generally, the Holy of Holies is the last room to the east. Most of the worship temples are on the east bank. Most of the funerary temples are on the west bank. And the reason for that is Ra rises, God. Ra rises in the morning and comes up in the east. In the night, Ra goes to the next world, go to sleep, and go down in the west.
These 2 major edifices here, there are figures that were there and they've been chipped away. Who was depicted here, and who chipped them away, and why?
Well, the central figure in all of these scenes, in this particular temple, will be Goddess Isis. This is her temple. And when you look at this, you will see Goddess Isis and other gods, God Horus, which, by the way, is her son. But you're dealing with Horus, or Heru, as the proper name would be, at various periods of his life. You would see then various gods. You see there, Goddess Hathor, which became the surrogate mother of God Heru. So the story is going to give you, from here, you will see other phases of this when you go to other temples. When we go inside, we will see that the early Christians set their cross, and they're going to put them on columns and on the walls. They set their various instruments for worship, like altar and so forth.
You mean they commandeered this temple for their own uses?
Right. They considered heathen and pagan, but they used the same heathen and pagan temple for their own church. This is the purification rites, or baptism. You see the water, symbolically the water, comprises of the ankh,
yes,
and the was scepter. Both things together, intermittently. Ankh, was scepter, as the water. See, they're hanging down there at the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
And this
Who is being baptized?
The Pharaoh.
Now, as we go back in here now, that is
the altar that the Christians use. The original altar that the ancient Egyptian used, that has gone.
But it was in that room that was known as the Holy of Holies.
Holy of Holies, or the sanctuary.
And that was
only the high priest.
In a sense, then, that was violated.
Oh yes, oh yes. That is the most sacred part of the temple.
Our tour was now in full stride as we left Aswan and headed north, that's down the Nile, toward the city of Luxor with all its many important temples, as you will see in our next special edition.
For a transfer, you in all the time that the ankh comes from the cross, not at all. There is an ankh, and there is a cross. Ankh there, and a cross to your left, and up. They mean two different things, have always meant two different things. Never has one been another.
Outside the main temple are lesser temples.
Now, this is off of the main temple, which is behind us. What is this here?
This is a kiosk.
What's that
or
mean?
A small little chapel. And it's the chapel belonging to goddess Hathor, Het-Heru. Now, what's unique about this temple, if you come here, look at there. And you see God Bes. This was originally the original god of the Nile, god of the life, because the life was life source. Now you see Bes playing every instrument there is. The harp, which you thought was a European instrument. Here is God Bless playing the tambourine. Here. Here is God Bless playing the flute and like an oboe. Here is over there playing in the form of a monkey, playing what Farouk call the electric guitar. Here is it. Look at like any electric. Here is playing a bassoon. Here, you see what I mean? He's playing all the major instruments that you thought were European.
Why you say that? I knew this a long time ago.
Yeah, but I just want to refresh your memory.
The back of this lesser temple looks out on a lake created by the building of a dam, which would have engulfed the temple had it not been disassembled and moved to this higher ground.
These are the remnants that they took out from that old site.
Yes.
And sooner or later they're going to be restored somewhere here.
Here. Mm-hmm. These remnants are going here. Build this temple here. They got 5,000 another island, which they will also bring here as money come available.
You know something? What I noticed here, there's some colors there.
Yes.
Of red and blue.
Right.
Right towards the top.
And the back, yes.
You mean to tell
some
me
of the
that they
original.
were that brilliant blue color?
And remember now,
right up here towards the top
yes,
of this?
Yes. And remember that some down by the low roof there too.
Yeah.
And remember, and some here, different places. But remember, this was mostly underwater all year round.
We boarded a launch across the Nile to meet our bus to go to Luxor. We saw a hotel that was in business during British rule. Dr. Ben was barred from staying here at that time. And then we were on our way to historic Luxor, with stops along the way at two important temples laden with information, as you will see.
This is the temple of Komombo, the double temple of the crocodile-headed god Subik and the falcon-headed god Haroes.
When was this built and who built it?
This was originally a temple before the Roman period and the Greek period. However, when the Greeks came as conquerors, they ordered a temple be built here, and this also called the Greek period, and that was done by the Ptolemies.
Is this the same concept in all the temples that you go back into different?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
The open court, the hypostyle hall, the antechamber, and the Holy of Holies, but this is a double temple. What you have on one side, you also have on the other side. So you have two Holy of Holies in this temple.
I see. Now I see Horus. And this is a good shot of the baptism, isn't it?
Yes. There you have, in this case, there you have Horus, or Horakti, and you have the Pharaoh, the Ptolemy, and you have the god of scribes, the god of historians, and that will be Tahuti. The Greeks call him Thoth.
Are these original colors here?
Oh, those are some of the originals. That goes back to the original.
Boy, this must have been just gorgeous.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. This is the purification rites, or baptism of the Pharaoh. This is the god Tahuti, sometimes called Thoth if you're using from the Greek way. He is holding the jar, the goblet, with the holy water, and on the opposite side is Haroes holding another. They're pouring the holy water over the Pharaoh.
Which Pharaoh?
This is Ptolemy 11th, or Ptolemy 12th. You notice that the holy water is made up of Ankh and was scepter. Ankh was scepter. Ankh was scepter. The Ankh is the key of life, the symbol of the key of life. The was scepter is the highest authority of the king.
So baptism didn't take place when you were an infant?
Oh, no. Well, baptism goes back for thousands of years, long before the story of Jesus and John the Baptist.
But contrary to the way we've been taught to think of baptism, it took place when you were grown.
Oh, yes.
What's it the next?
The next is the preparation of the coronation scene with the putting of the crown on the Pharaoh's head. And here you have the god Nit and goddess putting the goddesses, Nith another one, putting the crown on the king's head. And Horus, witness it. Horus is carrying the was scepter. You remember you just saw the was scepter in the thing? This is the highest authority, the was scepter.
And you can see that's Horus because it's the head of the falcon.
He's carrying the head of the falcon on the head, on the disc of god Ra on the head. And here you have Goddess Hathor and the Queen Cleopatra.
This is Cleopatra.
Cleopatra. One of the better image of her that you would see.
It's not too much like Liz Taylor, though.
Oh no, not at all.
And the hair?
Not at all. That is actually you could see coarse hair, curl up, and then here is God Horus again.
Over on the right,
yes. Haroes in this case.
Dr. Ben, what is this?
This is an ancient calendar of the times when they was based upon the lunar calendar. If you would notice, it is based upon the moon and then the sun. For instance, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 and 4 is 8. The month, 8th month. This would be 2, 4, 5. The 5th month. The 4th. See, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th month. See, the 11th month, and so forth, so that you know what year it was, what month.
Did they have a 365-day?
365 and a quarter day, corrected each 4th year. But they had a 13-month calendar. There was 12 months of 30 days each, and 1 month of 5 days.
Go ahead.
Here is another scene. This is very important because it shows the pharaoh paying homage to goddess Isis, or goddess Aset, sitting on the birth chair.
What do you mean? Birth chair? What do you mean? This is how deliveries were made from a stool like that?
Right. And if you notice her breast, that it's full.
Yes.
Full of lactation for when she has a baby. And notice again that the stomach is large, showing that she is pregnant. But equally, you notice they were prepared just in the event that she had any trouble. Here is the surgical instrument. If she had run into trouble.
All these surgical scissors?
Scissors, the knives, the scalpel.
The scalpel up here.
Up there. You have those little things that they use to retractors and everything like that.
Isn't that something?
Those were old instruments. And here is the man, Imhotep, who used to be the great
Saqqara, the step pyramid.
That's right. And look at this, where you used to wash the hand. To keep, you see, they said that Pasteur, and Madame Curie and all of them started thinking about cleanliness. This is way back there. One had to wash one hand before one committed surgery.
You know what I noticed about these temples? They've been worked and reworked over.
Right, so they were different periods.
And each period they did their own thing on it.
Somebody came and either occupied or continued.
What's this?
If you notice all the way down, the water would come in from the river. And this is a Nileometer or Nileometer.
My.
So you could see the different level as the water darkens around the rim here. So the crocodile would come, they would get the crocodile come in, and they'll catch the largest and the strongest crocodile and keep it here in the Nileometer. Plus, they will know when the high tide, they will know when the flood is coming down, because this will get higher and higher. And since the rains come in Ethiopia and Uganda around July and August, by September it would come, but they would see it when it's coming because
in advance.
Because the water would rise.
Oh, this would sort of forecast.
Right, and they would also be able to tell the taxes, taxation based upon the height of the water. Means how much water they're going to get and how much silt they're going to go up. They know from just here in the meter.
You know something? While I have you here, I've noticed that in the tour groups, I haven't seen many tour groups of color here.
No. In 1957, there was one. I introduced the first one in 1957, a few professors, as a matter of fact, it was 9 people. And I kept bringing 10, 9, 5, things like that number. The first large group came in 1978. It was a group from California I brought. They came from Watts, the Penang Institute out there, medical group. It was by Dr. King and others, and they were called a NUS group.
Well, without getting into too much detail, my question is, why don't we see many groups here of color? Even to this day, 1994?
Because our people have been given a bill of goods that only the western part of Africa we could relate to. We've been trained that way by the school system, by the churches, by the synagogues, the mosques, and everything, that we had nothing to do with this part of the world.
And that's been the mission of your life, to correct that.
Is to show it quite to the contrary.
All right, let's press on. Oh.
Our next stop was at the huge temple at Edfu.
This is the big one. It's the biggest singular temple except for
Karnak.
Warit. Because Warit is a series of temple within a temple.
How many pharaohs added and were involved with this temple?
8.
8? That's all?
That's all.
Ramesses had his hand in here.
Oh yes, everywhere. Mm-hmm. There's no place that he didn't have a hand.
All right, so there is
the Pharaoh.
Horus.
The Pharaoh. Pharaoh greeting Horus.
Yep.
So you got it down, Horus. That's Horus.
Listen, don't mess with the kid. I know now.
Yes.
You've beaten me up enough, I know.
You will notice that the architecture is the same kind of thing with a quadrangle. And then you have your series of columns. The series of columns here follow the pattern that you will see in Abydos, the columns, the colonnades, as a part of the courtyard. You will see colonnades here as the same type of colonnades when you get to Luxor, in the temple at Luxor in Warit. You see the colonnades.
In addition to being a place of worship and a place to document their stories and their religious stories, did the pharaohs and the priests live here?
They live next to the palaces where they were going to be buried.
What do you mean palaces?
The king's palace was where the burial place would be, more than where the worship. They never lived where the worship temples were.
Why haven't we seen any of the palaces? They don't survive?
We haven't been to a mortuary palace yet. All the palaces we've gone thus far is worship temples. When we go to the West Bank, we have not been in the West Bank yet.
Do you have any idea why these courtyards are so huge?
Well, they built monuments to the deity. They were building to the deity, and they built large, colossal thing to the deity, saying to the deity, I pay tribute to you.
Now, how did they get up there to do the inscribing upon the edifices there?
Well, that was easy. They built scaffold. That was easy. When they get up to there, they would build a scaffold, and they had ramps. What we are looking here is a dramatization of the story of Horus revenging the murder of his father by his uncle. You would notice that he harpoons the hippopotamus representing his father, because he's a god, and you can't show a god being killed. So this hippopotamus is the symbol of the bad god, which is his uncle, Set-Typhon.
And what do we have over here?
He turns up the animal, hippopotamus, but they continue the struggle with the bad god, the hippopotamus. There it is, see? And he harpoons him.
All right.
Continue down, and as you see the different gods and goddesses in the story. They're assisting him, because remember, they're killing the evil god.
This was a treacherous murder.
It's a treacherous murder. He had killed his uncle 2 times. This is the second time. First, he hanged his uncle. The second time, he had hung him again, but cut him up into 2 pieces. 14 pieces. The one piece that was missing because had been eaten by the Nile catfish, but that we will see elsewhere. Here, they are being greeted. See the ladies hitting the tambourine? He is greeted coming in here, and he has already killed Horus.
Now here, over here to the left,
is the hippopotamus.
Much bigger now.
Much bigger. And here, but one thing I want to bring to your attention, he kills him with a harpoon.
Yes.
Yet they told us in school that the Swedes invented the harpoon. They know Sweden when this story is. They know Sweden when they made this temple. And yet we have a harpoon. So somebody had a harpoon long before the Swedes had it.
The top are of Hathor, is that correct?
Yes, all of it.
In there. All of these faces.
All of the column heads is Hathor.
In order to hack away and chisel away all of this work, those who did it had to erect scaffolding.
Most of them erected ladders because scaffolding, they didn't have as much material, but they had little scaffolding, but most of it was done with ladders.
The point I'm trying to make is that it took a lot of effort.
Oh, yes.
To really do such damage to this magnificent temple.
The time they took to do this, they could have built their own building. The point is that they condemned this building, they destroyed the things in there, and then used the building. They called the building pagan, and the people pagan and heathen and all that, but they used the same building that they condemn as pagan.
Well, you can't show MGM movies in a Paramount building.
They take some water and call it holy water, sprinkle it around, say a few prayers, and that make the pagan building become a good Christian building.
Okay. This is what, some sort of a...
This is a chapel, a small chapel. And as a matter of fact, it's a chapel of Goddess Nut.
How do you spell that?
N-U-T. Pronounced Nut. Some people write it N-O-U-T.
And what is the significance of this, the ceiling?
If you look, you would notice Goddess Nut's head here, her hands hanging down there, her body comes this way, her foot goes down, and then you see the sun, God Ra, comes as the sun with all its rays, and the rays coming from her, the sun comes out of her vagina, and the rays go over Goddess Hathor. Hathor holding the tree of life, and her head is staying on a mountain. Then you see the sun going back in the night as the moon and going back through her body. She takes it back through her mouth. It goes again around her body and comes out through her vagina constantly, because the wall never ends.
The whole cycle of life then?
Yes, sir. Wall never ends.
Revolves around the female?
Yes. Out now.
Oh boy. We're on the top of this temple now. And what is this?
This is a sundial. It was made for the room to tell time.
How does it work? Do you know?
Well, the sun cast a shadow in here, and they had a compass for the time of the world, and the sun would, as it moves up to the fulcrum, it would cast a shadow, and they could tell what time of the day it was.
So all of that is long gone.
Yes.
How did you know then that it was this?
Well, it was here, and we know, seen it in other temples, and know what this is.
I see.
And you notice by the way the faces of Hathor is all gone again.
I can tell by the cow ears, but again, it's all the face.
And the hair.
These are keys which indicate
wall.
In other words, this is what the column was anchored into. These little
there was a wall here. See the wall?
Yeah.
Were you sitting on?
This is it, huh?
That's right. That was where. See that?
Ah, I see.
There was a wall this wide.
These were anchored. I see.
A wall this wide.
And there's other keys on top of that, so this wall was quite high.
Went up.
Wow.
See, because they had to earthquake, they had to anchor these stones. They couldn't just put one and depending on the weight. You had earthquake.
So they used the key, but never mortar.
No, no mortar.
Wow.
Egypt is the mother of the Western world civilization. It didn't start here. It started where Hunapa said at the beginning of the Nile, but it reached its zenith here. The whole world must look to Egypt. The entire world, bar not a single country. Every high culture must come here for the beginning of what they are. I don't care if it's Jewish, if you're Christian, or you're Muslim, if you're Greek, or you're Roman. You must come here. Here is where it started, along the Nile, and here it reaches zenith. If you're talking about Abraham, you're talking about Moses, they were here. Moses, they said, was born here in a place called Goshen. Abraham came here and received his education. He had no education before he came here. All of them came here. The whole thing about the 10 Commandments came out of the 42 negative confessions.
Dr. Ben is teaching reverse racism.
They call it what they want. I don't mind what they call it. The fact is, if a teacher come here and prove me wrong, I'll go anywhere they got and show them what they wrote, where it came from, and carry them to where it came for them to see it. The point is, my evidence still exists. They can't show me Adam and Eve, but I could show them Osiris.
Luxor, and set out across the Nile for the Valley of the Kings on the west bank. We passed through a small village and got a different kind of visual treat. It was market day. We got a chance to look at the everyday folk of today's Egypt. But our business was history.
This is the temple of Ramesses III and others. But what's unique about this guild is that the oldest flush toilet is still here.
You gotta be kidding.
Yeah.
A flush toilet.
Yes, I'm going to show you.
Where?
When we go here, go into the next section. As a matter of fact, you still smell the doo-doo. Yes, sir.
Now, how did that work?
Now, there was a bucket up here, and they will tilt the bucket when the person is finished. It was also a shower here.
I see.
And then when they tilt the bucket, it would flush the water. As you notice there's a trough.
It's the trough.
This will go down, and there's a hole down there. The water will run out and go into a flush system.
And how old is this?
This goes back at least the 20th dynasty, about 1100 and add before the Common Era, before Christ.
1100 before Christ. Where was Rome at that time?
Didn't exist. 100 years at least before there was a Rome or Greece.
Interesting. Interesting. Now this is a side of the temple, Dr. Ben, but boy, is this dug out deep. Why?
They did that to avoid destruction by the people who came and defaced temples. So they make this very deep. Even the attempt to deface it, in terms of this, that was done. By the way you got your hand, you just touch a scene from the Nile. See the different type of fish.
There's a duck chasing the fish.
That's right, and you can see the different types.
I see.
A mullet, a snapper, and so forth.
But this was really designed to frustrate anybody who wanted to deface
the property.
In other words, they had experienced it already.
Oh yes, he's come now in the 20th dynasty, Ramesses III. He's in the 20th dynasty, and he's had at least all the way from the temples going back to the 17th dynasty, always been the face.
So most of the figures in this temple then are cut deep like this?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Okay, well then let's go inside the courtyard again. Huge court. Now, where are we now?
That is the colonnade with statues. Every one of those statues is a figure of Ramesses III. And you notice he used the same method of presenting himself and his sons as Ramesses II did.
This is huge.
Yes.
This is just...
It's colossal. Colossal. And when you consider, it goes all the way back in the Gill.
How long did it take to do this, and where did they get the stones from?
Well, local
all the way
stone.
Back in Aswan?
No, the marble, where you use marble, that came from Aswan. Where you use the limestone, it came from the local quarries.
Now, what would this courtyard be used for? The multitudes, the common people would come here, as they're called?
The common people come, and the priests, and the priests address them.
Right, but could the masses go any further inside?
No, they'll stop here.
Now, on the right here, on this wall, which is just off this huge courtyard, the faces look, they don't look African on the right here.
Those are ancient people.
Are these the invaders?
These are the invaders. As a matter of fact...
And they're bearing arms.
Yeah, but they're not the invaders in this particular case because Ramesses went to Asia and fought them. They had invaded before. They're forced back, and now Ramesses pursued them, so that they are fighting now on Asian territory.
All right, but now as you move further to the left, you see that they're actually meeting in combat here. One has a sword.
You notice that the distinct difference in features.
Well, as you move to the left, yes.
Right. You then see where the two combatants meet together, you see one is an Asian and one is an African. You see African with long pleated hair. You notice the face, the facial, the nose and the lips, so you got no doubt.
Yeah. And they're wrestling there?
And they're wrestling, they're fighting. But some are falling, others are standing up. The battle is going on. The Africans fighting for Egypt and the Asians fighting for Persia.
What is the significance of looking at this?
The significance for me in this particular case is to show that there were Africans and the Egyptians were fighting as Africans, and they fought people as Asians.
Of a statue of Ramesses II, which weighed over 100,000 tons intact. We also saw workmen who were working to restore this funerary temple site. This funerary temple was where Ramesses II's corpse was prepared for burial. And Dr. Ben also showed us some Roman arches that weren't built by Romans.
Those are archways for the granary. When the Pharaoh Ramesses II had his complex, for the men who were working here, they had a granary where they could store their food and everything.
What is the significance of looking at this?
The significance is looking at it to see that in architectural and art school today, they teach that these arches are Roman arches and are Greek arches. And these arches existed before there was a Rome or a Greece. Ramesses died in 1232 BC, and Rome or Greece wasn't built until at least 1000 BC.
And then Dr. Ben threw us a curve. In the Valley of the Kings, he showed us a temple for a queen.
Now, Queen Hatshepsut is one of the few women who were pharaohs.
The only woman who ruled as a pharaoh. Other women ruled as queen, but she's the only woman to rule as a queen and a king simultaneously. She claimed she was not born of an ordinary person, but she was the daughter of a god and a goddess. And that gave her the right to rule as a king and as a queen.
What god did she worship? Did she recognize Ra?
Yes, Amun-Ra, everyone. The only person who did not worship Ra, per se, was Akhenaten, but everybody did. Amun-Ra, she said, was her father.
One of the wonders of this temple of Hatshepsut is where it was selected, because it's in sort of a cove, isn't it?
It is right up against the mountain. If you went inside, you will find that it goes into the mountain. This is the hypostyle hall of the chapel. The chapel is in that door where you can't go in. You used to be able to go in, but you can't go in anymore.
So all of this was enclosed at one time?
Oh, yes.
It had a ceiling?
Oh, yes, and had a ceiling. It's like a hypostyle hall.
I see.
And you notice the ramp up. It ramps up.
Yes, yes, yes.
It goes high.
It goes high up to the...
High up.
It went right in there.
Right. It
We
go up
can't
higher.
get in there now.
No, and behind that door was the signature of her architect, Samut, which they got a rumor. I want to emphasize, rumor. There's no written proof that she had an affair with her architect.
Holy of Holies is in the back?
Well, no. If you could use as a shrine, there's no Holy of Holies. This is a funeral temple.
I see. There wouldn't be. I understand.
You could look to the right, to the left there. You will see it. And then in every one of these columns, you see the Hathoric head, and all four sides.
Who is this up here
Where?
on the next level?
That's her husband, Thutmose II.
That's Thutmose.
You see, her father, you got to know a little history about her, how great she was. When the Hyksos were here, that's the first foreign conquerors of Egypt.
She stood up to them?
They came from Asia, around the Oxus River. They came and destroyed the 13th dynasty and started the 14th. By the time of the 17th dynasty, people here, kings from here, a man by the name of Amus I, got mad and organized the forces against the Hyksos.
To drive them out?
To drive them out. He got killed on the battlefield, and his son, Thutmose I, took over.
Continued the fight?
Continued the struggle. He got killed on the battlefield. His daughter, who took after him, took over above the second because he was too young. She took over the battle and pursued the Hyksos.
That daughter would be Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut. Makare Hatshepsut.
She was a rough lady.
She was a strong woman. She brought women in the government in certain positions, but she did not allow women to interfere with the priesthood, to go into the priesthood. They developed their own system called the priestess, but they were not allowed to participate with the men. Yes. A Nubian queen, plus the fact, Gil, she started what is today called women's liberation. Oh yeah, brother. Today what you call women's liberation movement, she had done it thousands of years before.
Amen.
That's what I like to say.
Two tombs here that are known of. Perhaps the best known of which is the all but vacant tomb of Tutankhamun. Best known because the boy pharaoh's tomb was discovered intact in the early 1900s. Egyptians working under an Englishman named Howard Carter came, quite by accident, upon a few steps leading downward, this in November of 1922. Carter was contacted and he ordered the digging to continue. They found the tomb of King Tut, a sensational find. The treasures of this tomb were brought out into daylight for the first time in thousands of years. Works of solid gold, alabaster, and other precious minerals, fashioned into exquisite works, intended not for the eyes of the living, but to accompany the young king on his journey to the afterlife. Then Dr. Ben and I took a look at the tomb of Ramesses IV.
If you look at the ceiling, Gil, you see there are different examples from the papyrus, the various papyri you see, like the papyrus of Ani and so forth. And the wall quotations from the various holy books. Goddess Ma'at to recite the 42 admonitions to her, otherwise called the negative confessions.
From which came?
From which came 10 of them is called the 10 Commandments. Moses is supposed to have gotten it on Mount Sinai, but I don't know how he could get that when it was already been taught to everyone in Egypt at the education center at Luxor. Luxor was then called what Set. The Greeks came and changed that name to Thebes. The Arabs came and changed it to Luxor.
What we're not looking at, though, is the architectural achievement. This passageway and this whole tomb is cut into the side of a mountain.
It's cut into the side of a mountain, and then it is smoothed, then it is carved, and then painted into the beautiful colors you see here.
Wait, they had to know what they were doing as far as tolerance?
They are the architects and engineers. This wasn't haphazard guesswork.
And what is this? What is this? The tomb actual sarcophagus?
And where the body was put into, hermetically sealed. That's the big one, and there was a smaller one inside of that big one. So plus the wrappings that the body was in, and kept the body for thousands of years.
And this is the tomb of Ramesses IV.
Ramesses IV, one of the Ramesside kings.
The Valley of the Kings looks down on a flatlands area that is almost level with the Nile River. And in this area stands the huge colossus of the pharaoh Amenhotep III. This pharaoh sired a son who would have a major impact on the religious concepts of succeeding civilizations, because this son, Amenhotep IV, also known as Akhenaten, formulated the concept of one supreme god, known as monotheism. These gigantic colossus were carved out of a single piece of sandstone. Dr. Ben and his accompanying guide talked to me about these colossus.
Why are these colossus so far away from the Valley of the Kings?
Yes, they were in front of the temple, funerary temple. That time being 18th dynasty, they have been constructed temples so far to mislead the grave robbers.
Tell me something. Do you ever have the feeling that they haven't found all the tombs?
They found the 62 of one period, but there are other pharaohs missing of other periods.
And nobody knows where they're buried?
No, they could be anywhere in Egypt, because...
digging in Egypt by luck, by chance, like Howard Carter has been discovered, King Tut by luck.
But sheer luck. As a matter of fact, it was Sheikh Abdul Rahman, his father, was the one that found the tomb. And Howard Carter get the credit.
The credit, yes.
Is it true what they're saying, that Howard Carter turned out to be a grave robber himself?
All of them.
That he kept some of it for himself?
All of them kept for themselves. And they sold to museums, and they kept for themselves, and they sold to museums. But they blamed the people who were equally robbing the tombs. But when they robbed the tombs, they didn't keep the monuments, the artifacts to themselves. Somebody got it, and they don't have it, so somebody got it.
Dr. Ben told us that most tombs and funerary temples, where the bodies are readied for burial, were located on the west bank of the Nile because the sun sets in the west. On the east bank were the temples of worship for the living, such as those directly opposite the Valley of the Kings, one of which is the largest worship temple ever built. Just wait till you see it. It's on the west bank of the Nile in the city of Luxor. This hour begins on the east bank, where Dr. Ben took us to two important temples in Luxor one of which is described by Dr. Ben as the largest temple ever built, anywhere, at any time, as you will see. 2 temples first.
These were built by 3 main pharaohs. The first was Amenhotep III, then his son Akhenaten, then Ramesses II.
All right, now, as we turn around, we will see the main entrance to this temple that this walkway leads into.
This was the training temple for the priests. Here was where a man came at age 7. He remained for 40 years.
40?
Yes, to complete. The training of the priest took 40 years. One could not be a priest unless he was 47.
What could entail such a long period of study?
He learned the 7 liberal arts, engineering, science, mathematics, medicine, law, theology, you name it. The people didn't come here. They didn't come in here for anything. Only the priests came in here, the young training priests. The Colossus is Ramesses II.
Both of them?
Yes.
So he had a hand in this too?
Oh, yeah, he built this section. He built from where the Colossus is to the front.
Aha.
He added this section on. Right. This section that changed, you notice the angle of the main access line.
Now, beyond these colossus, we see these long, tall columns.
Hypostyle hall, the hall of columns.
What is that? What went on in there?
That's the aisle to go through.
Just the passageway?
The passageway.
What was the relationship between the priest and the pharaoh?
The priest was, the chief priest was the advisor of the pharaoh, and the priests were under the domination of the chief priest, not the pharaoh. They related to the chief priest.
So these priests had a lot of power.
Yeah, they were the people of knowledge. They advised the aristocrat or the pharaonic system. They were the head of the educational system, which the Greeks call the mystery system.
Now again, I see this passageway begins to ascend, which means we're headed towards the Holy of Holies.
Yes, in a sense, that is true in its total sense. However, this particular chamber doesn't move you directly into the Holy of Holies.
No, not yet. No, but I can see up ahead.
Yes, you go into the colonnade, the court of colonnades, the court of the priests, where the priests assemble those in training, and they would walk around these colonnades. You see columns on 3 sides, double columns, where there's a walk. It's called the colonnade of the priests.
Now these columns are fluted.
These are fluted papyrus column, as you see in front of you. Yes. This is a Holy of Holies. When the early Christians came in and occupied this, they painted scenes from the Christian religion. Look at on the wall. Some of them are still remaining. You can see some of the scenes.
But I can see some of the scenes, yes.
Right. On all over. They painted this also.
And they did it over the original...
Oh, yes. Yes.
I see.
You could see some of it is gone now, and they painted over the originals. When we start to enter here, you see certain quote-unquote Gothic arches with the early Christian used. They took, look at that. Look at that piece of column where it's upside down. Look at the foot, the legs. They didn't worry even how they put it. That's upside down. They used the stone from another temple.
What about this concave entranceway here? Who built that?
That was done during the Roman time. They tried to make the imitation of what the Romans had developed by this time. And they put that there.
What the Africans had developed by this time?
But what the Africans had developed, they added to it.
I see.
When we left the Luxor temple, Dr. Ben and I walked down a long avenue of sphinxes with ram's heads that once connected the Luxor temple to the awesome temple of Karnak. so huge and beautiful it's difficult to describe.
It is a temple that started way back in the 12th dynasty.
Under which pharaoh?
They are not certain. However, it was resumed. Work was resumed on it in the 18th dynasty by Amenhotep III.
Okay, now this is the main entrance, and these are the figures of
Amun-Ra.
In the form of a ram's
head, a lion body. Standing between the two paws is God Amun-Re.
And this is the main entrance, my God.
It's the main pylon. As you notice, these stone, the pylon, this thing was even touched good. Because you see the rough stone, see? There was rough stone all over, see? Now, this is done this side more than that side. But even so, there's hardly any work done comparatively, because they had to smooth out this temple here. And
why?
Because the work, you place the stone in place first, then you do the finished work.
And they never got to do that?
They never got to do it.
Okay.
I mean, it'll take another century for them to finish this temple.
This is one huge temple.
Yes, it's the largest worship temple in the entire world. You can take St. Patrick's Cathedral, St. John the Divine, both in New York. You could take the Canterbury Cathedral. You could take the St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome. All of them, and put them together and run almost the Indy 500 and still got room. See, look, as far as your eye can see.
Now, what is this? This is the first courtyard.
This is the first courtyard. That was the mud ramp that as you
carried the rocks up.
As you go up, you lengthen the ramp. And you can you carry up the rocks up there.
Could it be then that this is the same way the pyramids were made?
Exactly. The construction to build very high, they did it by ramps. You keep the same angle, so as you go higher, you lengthen the ramp. That you keep the same angle.
Okay, now let's talk about some of these figures. There's a huge column here. What is that?
These columns were built by Tihaka, the pharaoh that came here from Ethiopia, one of the Ethiopian pharaohs.
I see. Now, guarding the entranceway, there are two statues, and they represent death.
This one represents life.
Life, that
one represents death.
Of which person?
Ramesses II.
Ah, there he is again.
That's right.
All right. And then there, of course, is the ram's head with the lion's
ram's
body
head,
all the way around.
Same as the ram's head you saw outside.
And this is an anteroom.
No, that's the temple of God Amun, the specific temple. See, the whole thing is the great northern temple of Amun. But that particular one is the temple, the specific temple of Amun himself.
So this temple is huge, but it is a conglomeration of many temples.
Right.
All right, now when we leave this enormous courtyard and walk down here, what are we going to see?
Well, we go into the hypostyle hall. You're going to see 134 columns, 50 feet tall each, and about 7 to 8 feet in diameter.
God.
All stone. You're going to see all kinds of carvings in it, but in particular here, Gil. Right up there, you see God Min that I spoke to you about.
Yes.
Here is it. And on every one of these 134 columns, you'll be looking at God Min. Everywhere, the god of fertility. And elsewhere, he dominates this because Ramesses II, though he followed many, he followed Akhenaten father. Akhenaten father was the first in the 18th dynasty to continue this temple.
These columns supported a ceiling. This was enclosed at one time.
Yes. If you will notice, there is a low ceiling and there is a high ceiling.
Yes.
At that section was the low ceiling, and you would notice, right looking between these two columns, you would see a kind of grid pattern going from the low column on top. That you see the column here?
Yes, yes.
The beam across.
Yes, yes.
Then you see built up is the grid pattern to the higher column. That allow you to get light in at the side. And both, there were roofs. There was the low roof and the high roof.
And there's some of the original colors.
Oh, yes, and you would see the original columns under that beam, and you should see some of the original color under this beam. At least a little piece there. There is it, see?
Yeah.
We're holding this. And then you see original color under that beam over there also at the high
Tell
roof.
me something. Why do some columns end when scoop out like a flower and then some are straight up?
Because some of the work wasn't finished. And this is the papyrus form column. You got to, because this is in the south, the column, the capitals of the column are made like a lotus flower. When you go to the north, the capitals of the column are made like papyrus, unless they got what they call the mix capital, where they integrate both papyrus and lotus or other design.
And you know what's also astounding is how well laid out these columns are.
Oh yes. If you went
look at that line there, it's perfect.
Yes, but if you went in the center here, you would notice that if you went in the center here, you would notice, Gil, if you went in the center here, you would notice a complete, from the end of the building to the other end of the building,
right down there.
there's a straight through.
Perfectly aligned.
Just as this one, it forms somewhat of a cross.
Yes.
You go straight down through the entire temple. That would be west to east, or you go down from north to south, the entire temple.
Amazing. Just amazing. This is about 6 stories tall.
Well, 50 feet, 5 feet per 10 foot is a floor. From floor to floor is 10 feet, and that's one floor. You got 50 feet, that's 5 floors.
5 floors. 5 stories.
5 stories.
No mortar.
No mortar. If you notice there's a good example of the original column, the face there. There's no mortar. The joints are perfectly as if they were sanded.
When we were at the Ram Museum, we were looking at one of the bases.
Yes.
And there was a little hole.
A key.
And that's a key.
A key.
And that was used to anchor.
That was to anchor the stone. Just in the event of hurricane, not a hurricane, earthquake, that if it didn't shake, it would move. It would act as if it was one solid piece.
So you're looking at master engineers, master architect.
Oh yes.
Master craftsmen.
Of their period. And up to today they would be masters.
And a magnificent religion.
Oh yes.
Religious philosophy of peace.
These were the founders of religious theosophy used today by Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They have not gone beyond it. They're still using the fundamentals that were established along the Nile and best expressed here in this temple. Yes.
In addition to the religious theology that was embodied here, there's just a sense of peace and tranquility. That is absolutely overwhelming.
Of a god for whom this magnificent temple was named.
That is a relief of God Amun-Re, holding an ankh in his left hand. The ankh is the symbol of the key of life, and in his right hand he has the highest symbol of office, the was scepter. In front of him is Ramesses II, the pharaoh, giving him a gift of something to drink.
Now these are awesome obelisks.
Yes?
Which is a Greek name, is it not?
Yes, it means a needle-like pyramid. In fact, you notice on the top, shapes like a pyramid. And that used to be color by coated with silver and gold.
Really?
Yes, they call it electron.
Are these two related in any way as far as religion is concerned? Or?
Yes. That one is the column.
The one on the right?
Yes, the obelisk of Makari Hatshepsut.
Yes.
And this is of her son-in-law, Thutmose III.
It's the same Hatshepsut queen who we saw.
Right. That's she reigned at 1580 to 1450 something.
Where was this granite brought from?
Aswan, which is about 4.5 hours drive from here, south.
4.5 hours drive?
Yes, by automobile.
And there was no driving in those days?
No, well.
So they brought it up on barge?
It came up on the boat.
Somehow they got it out of the quarry.
Out the quarry.
Got it down to the river.
Down to the river.
Put it on a barge that was large enough. This is one piece.
That's
one
right.
Solid
one
piece.
solid monolithic piece.
How much does it weigh, would you say?
Oh, I mean, a few thousand tons.
What does the shape of the obelisk represent?
It represents a tapered penis. Frankly, it goes back to the story of Isis, using the Greek name. Aset would be the Egyptian name. Put in erecting a symbol of her husband's penis, because her husband, Asar, or otherwise called Osiris, was murdered by his brother, Set-Typhon. It was also Aset's brother.
That's that story we saw on the wall.
Right.
With the hippopotamus.
Right. And when he was murdered and cut up into 14 pieces, she went and find the pieces symbolically around the world, but could not find one piece, the penis, because his brother had thrown that piece in the Nile, and the Nile catfish ate it. So she had them built or cut an obelisk to remind those who had persecuted and murdered him of his penis, so that whenever they go, they'll always have to see his penis.
I see.
You would notice that it's George Washington Memorial in Washington, D.C. is a copy of this.
So what are you saying to me?
That it's a symbol of his penis.
Not George's, but...
George, the President of the United States, the obelisk is symbolic of the penis regardless of who got one. It has one meaning. Now why?
I wonder what George would say.
Well, you know why? Every member of the United States, original Congress, and members of the cabinet of the United States, the first cabinet, was a Mason except one man, Benjamin Franklin, because he was a Quaker.
What does that have to do with what we're talking about?
The symbols they used for setting up the United States was based upon the Masonic order, of which they copied from here, the 22 tablets that were stolen from here by England. They used those tablets and used, take for instance...
And is the pyramid included in some,
yes.
The obelisk?
The pyramid and the money, like you said it.
And the obelisk?
The obelisk, the ever-seen eye, which they call some funny name for it, the pyramid, the sun boss, is symbolic of God Amun-Ra and Ra. This goddess Ma'at at the Supreme Court building with a scale, only that the scale with Ma'at is level. The scale in the United States is up and down. Not just this, but just this, not just this.
Okay.
And so on.
Chamber here that we are in. What are these two figures here, Dr. Ben?
Well, the figure on your left is Tutankhamun, and the figure on your right is his wife, the daughter of Akhenaten. She was the fifth daughter, Akhenaten, of Tutankhamun.
How can you tell this was King Tut?
Well, in this case, because I happen to know the question of the statue, although there is no cartouche for me to follow at this particular point, but at one time there was a cartouche on the body.
So even though he was a teenager, he had a wife?
Oh, yes. He was married to, Akhenaten married him to his daughter before he mounted the throne.
Just a quick word about features. Full lips, apparently wide nose.
It was
Was this an artistic concept, or is this an approximation of how the man looked?
The artist must have been running through this country, because that concept is going on a lot of statues.
Okie dokie. Now what's this?
This
I see that
is the Holy of Holies.
Goes up,
you
so
notice
it
that
must be...
the flow starts to ramp up. And as soon as the flow starts to ramp up, you start to question yourself, I am going to the Holy of Holies.
This is a place that you don't believe in going into.
I do not go into holies. I pay the reverence as I would not go into a modern synagogue, a modern church, a modern mosque in the Holy of Holies. I show it the respect.
You wouldn't walk on the altar of certain churches?
No, sir.
This is the
No, sir. I don't have to pray like the people who it belong to, but I show them the respect.
What is this?
This is based upon a calendar. The ancient Egyptians, how they were able to put numbers. 2, 1, 2, 3.
3.
10, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24.
24.
24 again. 33. 32.
I see.
100, 200, 10, 20, 30. 230. 220.
Now, how was this used?
Well, it was used to add.
Like a calculator?
Oh, yes. This was used as a calculator. And it was generally based upon months or something. They did the addition. They had to deal with how much grain, how much tons of this and tons of that. And that was the mathematical way of doing numbers.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take you to put all of this together?
In my head? I guess a few years.
A few years?
Yeah, you don't...
A few decades?
You don't know when you're getting it, when it's coming into you.
Well, what do you say to somebody who's looking at this program that we're doing and their head begins to swim? What do you say to them about how they can hope to deal with this?
My advice would be, don't get perturbed. It's a process of education, and it takes time.
It took time to build, and it took time to understand.
It took more time to build it than it takes time to understand it. Now we are going to the temple of Thutmose III. Yeah, I hope.
What?
The painting of Jesus.
Oh.
And Joseph and Mary. The Christians use this temple.
This faded figure here is supposed to be of Jesus?
Of Jesus with the wrong thing around his head, that thing.
So this was co-opted by...
This was made a Christian temple. Look at the other, and you're going to see more. Here. You see it? There.
Yes, I see it.
That's the statue of God, the triad of the temple. God, Amun, Amun-Re, his son Khonsu, God Khonsu, his wife, goddess Nut, the holy triad, which the Christians copied and called the Trinity. You look at the top of the column, see some still color, and you see Jesus, Joseph, and Mary, and you see where they copied it from. They cut that up to make it look like a crucifix, the early Christians. Not only did they...
How do you know this?
Well, because we have the evidence of the paintings there.
I see.
We have the evidence of the cutting of the thing by... Here is the point itself. These were statues, as you see. They didn't even finish because they didn't finish cutting off the neck and head of the one to the right. And we have the experience of all the other temples that they occupied.
Since Dr. Ben has been coming here for the last 50 years, sometimes as many as 6 times a year, just about everybody knows it.
Dr. Ben, brother.
Hi, brother.
How are you, brother?
My brother.
How are you? How are you? I've seen you. How are you? Good?
تمام. How are you? Good. أهلا أهلا أهلا.
How are you?
Good. Good morning. Welcome.
Oh, I see you again.
Welcome to Upper Egypt.
Who was this lake built for?
For the priests.
And who built it? Under what reign or dynasty?
Oh, this lake was built during the 18th dynasty under the reign of Amenhotep III.
And what is the purpose of this lake?
So that the priests could clean themselves. The priests in every ritual have to take a bath. Anything that he does in the temple, and anytime he enters the temple, he must wash himself before going. Anytime he eats, he must wash himself before putting in food in a dirty body.
Was there such a thing as a priestess?
Yes, but they didn't come here. They had their own temples, and they did not deal with these worship temples.
Now on the left here, I see some steps over on the left side of this lake.
Yes, that's
where they step down to do their
the
bathing.
Could come down and go up. Yes.
Let's ride north to see 2 temples. En route, there was some time to sort out and digest all that this man, Dr. Ben, had shown us. It took almost 2 hours to reach our first site, the temple at Abydos.
But I know she had to fall. I know it wasn't happen.
Yes.
Hello. Go on your foot.
We don't need that, Al.
42 steps.
Yeah?
Yeah, you could count 42 risers. This was built originally by Pharaoh Seti I. It was extended by his son, Ramesses II. What you are seeing here, this section was built by Ramesses II, and then...
There's that name again.
Everywhere. You're going to see him everywhere. There is Ramesses showing you his father also and himself and the god Osiris.
This was just a place of worship for him.
It was more than that, because when we go outside in the back and up to the rear, it is where Osiris is supposed to have been buried.
Oh, really?
The god of resurrection. It is here that
the one who was cut up in pieces.
Yes, with the back of the temple of Seti I.
All right.
And sitting on the exit and egress and ingress temple of Osiris.
All right. Now, what happened to Osiris? And when you say egress, that means go out.
Yes.
That means he went out through this tunnel here.
Right.
What happened that led him to go out through that tunnel?
He was murdered for the second time and completed his stay in the world, as you know it, and went to the netherworld.
Well, let me take you back a bit. For those who may be confused when you say he was murdered a second time, what was the first murder?
He was hanged by his brother.
Yes.
His wife, goddess Aset, appealed to God Ra. God Ra gave him the power to bring him back. She and the god of death, Ampu, otherwise called Anubis. He came back and the brother heard that he was back again. The brother came and killed him for the second time. This time cut him up into 14 pieces.
As depicted on that wall.
Right.
All right. And he somehow, he survived that.
Yes, his wife again